Oh yeah, you gonna do it?
You know I'm gonna pin it.
I dare you. I
Pin
double
it to win
dog
it.
dare you.
Deal. Posts. Usually takes 30 seconds to a minute for everybody to start joining. So this is the part of the show where Tom and I usually bullshit about nothing.
But people are already here because they were waiting. They were on YouTube, like
It's true.
Quantivious Washington, saying, "Where are we?" Because it was queued up on YouTube, just waiting to go. And
What's
now
up,
we're on.
everybody? They're starting to show up now. We got a special guest this week, everybody. This is FFIB. I am Jason. That's Tom, and we are Finger Flicked in Box. We're joined tonight by Sean Houston. You might know him as Triple B Handmade,
How's it
also
going?
Big Brown Bear. You have a lot of handles, sir.
Yeah.
He's
I wanted to keep it as confusing as possible. I figure. You got to put in the effort to get to know me.
Sean's YouTube content is fantastic. There's a lot of good information about sharpening, good information about knife steels, about metallurgy, and also he's a particularly good knife maker, knife designer. You seem to specialize in fixed blades, very usable, practical fixed blades, but also kitchen knives. Isn't that true?
Yes, sir. Yeah, especially like hunting knives, things like that. The fixed blades, they allow me to focus on my real passion, which is metallurgy and sharpening and just everything that can get me tuning in on the high performance of what makes the knife work. That's really my true passion.
I left out one more feature that you're particularly good at, and that's edge geometry. I've learned as much about edge geometry from you as I have metallurgy, so appreciate the education.
Oh, thanks, man. I really appreciate it. I've learned a lot from other people too, like guys like Phil Wilson. You got guys like Roman Landis and all these other guys. We kind of stand on the shoulders of giants. So I just kind of learn that stuff from them and pass it on. But I am also I'm using these things, so I can't help but notice the effect of edge geometry.
Absolutely. Standing on the shoulders of giants is a good way of putting it. We're learning from those that came before us, right? So
always, I'll pass the torch to somebody else one day too. We're always just kind of like this continuous march, like a shark's teeth. It gets old, worn out, and another one comes and takes its place. So this is just.
I'm confused now.
Yeah.
I didn't know Matt Parker was Natalie Joy Parker in the group.
Yeah, Miss Natalie is wise and fair, but she is not in the group. It's Matt, and why Matt doesn't have his own account, I'll never know.
So want to be confused, Sean? That's what happens.
I've teased him about it more than once.
And how does that work? We have people that are Facebook guests, and you have to sign in the Stream. Is it StreamYard or something like that in order to have your actual name pop up down here in the bottom? Or?
Well, the Facebook people that are joining because they saw it in the group, they can click a little box that allows their profile and their name to be used in the stream. And then over in YouTube, they can also see the stream in YouTube, but they can't see the Facebook comments. So, for one reason or another, it doesn't really tie over totally. He says he doesn't know how to change the name. Ask Natalie. It's funny. I remember at one point I was talking to him. I'm like, I thought it was really cool that your wife was in the group and that she seems like she's going everywhere all the time and doing stuff, and she's a mom, and and I was like, I went through her pictures once and I was like, oh, cool. But you're just freeloading on her account. He's like, yeah. So yeah, we got a good audience tonight. Kids, we wanted to start with something cool. Tom and I have been given advanced copies of a new knife that's coming out soon. Some call it the GOAT. In fact, we kind of coined the phrase ourselves. Tom and I had a conversation once about what Spyderco knife that's discontinued would be the greatest of all time if they brought it out of retirement. So that's how we got to the GOAT. We don't necessarily think it's the greatest knife of all time, just that it's a knife that we wish they would have brought back out of retirement and discontinued status. And lo and behold, Knife Joy answered the call, and they brought this knife out of retirement. So the Sliz Bowie is coming back. The knife is going to be an M390 again, just like the last run, but there is a big improvement. The knife now features a lock bar insert. It has a steel lock bar insert. The lock bar insert also has an over travel stop. It has two posts, that fastened the insert to the frame, and the detent ball is attached to the insert. So some criticism in the past has been levied on Spyderco about the fact that we have a detent ball in the titanium and no lock bar insert in there. They've now upgraded that, so you could call this a rolling CQI. It doesn't have a new model number, but that improvement is going to change the way the knife feels in the hand a little bit, because now you're going to have a steel on steel interaction instead of a steel on tie. So some people would comment that they were concerned that the face of the lock would wear out the titanium, Tom, and that the knife would wear out and surely it would die. So now we have this steel on steel and addresses that problem. So
I do like
people
that everyone's concern is that they only have one knife that they open and close 9,000 times a day. That might happen. But just in case they fix that concern.
You're the only freak here that opens a knife 9,000 times.
I know, and mine's fine. So that's saying a lot.
Most people do it like 20 times a day. You're the only one that wears your thumb out. Sean, more than once, Tom's called me. He's like, my thumb hurts. I'm like, what happened? I got a new knife. It's bleeding. Wow, dude. Put it down.
And you guys know a lot about like the knife construction and things like that. How much of a difference is that lock bar insert going to make when it comes to this version versus the original version?
For me, it's a feature that it has, but I was fine without it. I'll be fine with it. Mine doesn't have lock stick, but now I don't have to worry about it wearing out potentially. It's an upgrade that a lot of people have asked for.
I think from a repair standpoint, it is nice, because I've known of many people in the group. When I say many, I'm going to say like 25 or 30 that have had a Tai Chung made Spyderco, and they've had lockup issues, and there's nothing you can do to add titanium to the end of the lock bar. So once you start jacking with that, or you file it, or you mess with it, then you can't go back and you can't add material. In this case, you could fashion a new lock bar insert, drop it in there, and the knife's going to work like new again. So from a repair standpoint or dialing in the knife, it is an improvement. But to be honest, it doesn't mean you're not going to have lock stick. Lock stick is more a function of geometry than it is the metallurgy of the lock interface. So it doesn't necessarily solve the lock stick thing, but it does allow you to dial it in. So I'm kind of cool about that.
Mine is not completely lock stick free, but it is very good. It's definitely acceptable. There's like just a little whisper of it, and I haven't really played with it too much yet. So I'd say mine's good.
Excellent.
I will say that the M390 on this knife looks really nice. Like the grind is beautiful. You really did a cool job putting subtle grind lines on it that they're not too harsh, and they're consistent. So it's very beautiful. The jimping is slightly different than the original. It's a slightly more pronounced jimping than the original had. So the original knife had a real subtle way to it.
Looks nice. Here, if you hand it to me, I can hardness test it. Go ahead.
It's not a bad idea. I've got an Ames tester under my desk. Maybe I'll do it while I got it open.
Oh, you do? Excellent.
I do.
I didn't pull it out. Let me see.
Ouch. It came in an old box.
Wooden box, right?
Yeah.
There you go.
Cool
they
old
used
box.
they used to come in wooden boxes. Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, pull it out. Let me see what model.
It's a Model 2.
Okay. Is it calibrated?
It was calibrated, and then it was damaged, and then by me, and then it was it's seems accurate. So if I use the testing blocks that comes with it, then it's good.
Mm-hmm.
But I suspect that as I deviate too far from the testing block, I don't know that it's super reliable.
We'll have to go through that. We'll have to break that down, you and me, and check out the calibration on that thing, get it up and running.
I have a couple testing blocks that are it's within, gosh, I think it's within half an HRC. So seems pretty reliable.
That's good. Yeah, according to the ASTM E18 now we're at the 22. It has to be within half a point on the plus 60 blocks. And then the softer blocks, like a 45 or a 25 block, you could be within 1 HRC.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we'll check that out after the show.
I'll be honest, I'm a little bit of a coward to try it without rewatching the YouTube video on how to use it first.
Yeah.
So I'll do it later.
Okay, cool.
I don't need to jack anything up.
Fair
Hey,
enough.
Jeff Offers here.
Oh, nice. Jeffy boy.
Hey, Tom, the lock bar insert will be inconsequential for 99% of the people, except for maybe those who finger bang their knives open all day. That guy.
I mean, it's a beautiful knife. Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you enjoy it? I mean, you're buying this cool piece of art.
A couple of
Open and
things I
close it all
don't think
day.
we didn't totally finish thoughts is this doesn't have a drop date just yet. I don't think we mentioned that, but it will soon. It will very soon.
Do you guys know the street price on that thing?
Street price is $449. According to Chris Miller at Knife Joy, they're going to include some fun stuff with it. They're still working on what that will be, but it's not just going to be a bare bones knife. Chris hates conversations around quantities. If you ask him about it, he'll give you some 4-letter words about discussing the number of knives in a drop. He feels like if you tell everybody, they complain about it, and if you don't tell them, then they don't like it either. So I understand. Having watched about, 500 drops since Tom and I started this group, I understand. So I feel his pain. I will tell you that the last time they did this knife, there were a lot of them. So that being said, they did sell out too. They sold out relatively quickly. So I think this is going to be a popular knife. This is for year in, year out. It's everyone's favorite Spyderco or top 5 Spydercos. People that have tried them love them. And I think it's going to be a really popular knife. The Lockburn insert.
Back in the day, it used to be compared to like the Chris Reeve, Sabenza, stuff like that. Yeah, back before the market was flooded with titanium. Yeah.
Now that the market is much more diverse, it's not compared to Chris Reeve as much as when people like to go. People have a hard time just enjoying this knife for how good it is. They always have to go, but what about this instead? It's always like a comparison game. No one can ever just go, this is a really cool knife. Because it really is. At this price point, it's a great knife. There's also other good knives at this price point, and you all own more than one knife, so you can have both.
I'm kind of the same opinion, Tom. You can't compare a Toyota Camry to a Chevy Camaro and then say, well, for the money, the Camaro's got more horsepower. It's like, okay, but I have a 9-year-old and I need to put her somewhere. So Camaro's out. I drive sometimes in winter conditions. I don't want a Camaro. So it's kind of ridiculous to compare the Sliz Bowie and the Reeve because I don't know.
Well, here's a question for you guys. I got a question for you guys, since I know you guys are really geeked out on collecting all the different Spydercos and keeping track of all the different models. Would you guys say that this is a pretty important model if you're collecting Spydercos to have in your collection? As far as is this like the representation of Spyderco's best titanium frame lock?
It's the best knife they've ever made. I will say that in general, the model is, because it's different. It's kind of hard to compare this to a fluted titanium military or something. It's kind of hard to, because it's a Tai Chung knife. It's not like a classic golden model, maybe.
Okay.
But this is the knife that everyone wanted to collect. So the story, part of the reason this is called the GOAT is the story of how it got discontinued. No one wanted this knife when it was the original one. They were $300, and no one wanted to spend $300 on a knife back in 2017. Then along came this dude named Nick Shabazz, who dropped a YouTube video about this knife that blew it up. It exploded. It's what made Nick Shabazz popular, in my opinion. It's how I found it. It blew this knife up. And then 6 months later, mid-year, which doesn't happen, Spyderco discontinues knives in November usually. In June, they just go, by the way, Sliz Bowie discontinued.
So right when it was starting to take off, it discontinued,
right when the hype hit. And so I was like, this is when I was first getting Spyderco. I'm telling everybody, go buy them. It's such a good knife, because I already own mine. Before, I was updating people on what shops still had them on the shelves. People I'll just wait for it to get discounted. Well, that didn't happen. They just all sold out within days. All the shelves are cleared.
Not to mention, unfairly, all that ire fell on Shabazz. People were furious. They're like, you hyped up a knife I can't buy. How dare you? And then the used values went from $300 to $800 in about a 6-month period. You couldn't get one for $800. So everyone blamed that on Nick. It's not Nick's fault. It's kind of
that'll be, and you guys are going to have him come on later this year, right? I mean, it looked like from
we'd like to.
It was to be announced. So That'll be
Yep.
really cool to get him on here and pick his brain about what that was like to go through all that.
And Nick
When-
is the reviewer that got me into like Spider. He's the reason I own a native. He's the reason I own a PM2. And
really?
so like when he hyped this up so much, it got me excited, and I wasn't the only one for sure. It's the whole story. And that's like part of how it rolled into being the GOAT is it was the greatest knife, and they discontinued it right at the peak of when it was going to sell out.
The knife does have a CQI feature, everybody. It has a lock bar insert on the inside of the knife. It also features an over travel stop. From the outside, something I really like is there's no extra screw. You've probably noticed
that
on
is
frame
cool.
lock knives.
So you don't even notice it.
Yeah, it's kind of stealthy.
If you
on the
didn't take it apart, we wouldn't have known, I guess.
Exactly. It's actually, you can photograph it when the knife is open and it's assembled, but it's not super obvious to anyone but Brad Caldwell. So, I took it apart so everybody could see it, and it really is a useful addition from a repair and maintenance type of standpoint.
It's just, Brad says it's the Seinfeld of knives ended at its peak.
In a side chat we have with the moderators, Brad was saying, I don't like the way it looks when the knife is assembled. Like it's too much of it is standing out. And I see his point. There's a big shiny silver thing inside the Spidey hole cutout. But I think it's because of the Spidey hole cutout that you see it, right? How many of your frame lock knives have this feature?
I like big cutouts, though, personally. I mean, first off, too, like I want to say, you guys are always super geeked out on all the cool stuff. And you guys probably know what milled titanium pocket clips would go with this knife, or is there a milled clip that also
there is a
matches
milled
knife?
clip. The most commonly recommended one that comes to the top of my head is Rip's Garage Tech. Always is my default recommendation. I have one in the box. I do actually like the wire clip, but if you're looking for a solid clip, Rips makes an awesome one.
Okay.
It's the same shape, and it goes in there, and it's just basically like this but filled in.
I mean, 2017, when this knife came out, I mean, there really wasn't anything when it came to the different stuff you can buy now for accessorizing your knife. You were just kind of stuck with whatever it came with. But now there's all kinds of crazy cool stuff. Jason, I went to Tom's house, and it was just like knife porn. He had every cool thing
And real
you can
porn,
think
too.
of. Yeah, it was, oh my God. But like, it was like a mini knife show at Tom's place.
Right.
So I was kind of like, I mean, I'm into all this geekoid stuff, but I don't really get a chance to collect and try out all the different things. So when I got to his place, I was like, dude, this is so cool. Let me try that one. What do you think about this? And he gave me the rundown on all the latest knife stuff, because when you're a knife maker, you don't really get a chance to play with all the different knife stuff out there.
I'm going to guess that Sean owns less than 8 knives. How close am I?
I own a lot more, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, I keep them for testing. I run them for comparison. I shouldn't have as many as I do, but they're for testing. It's like a testing library. Yeah, I keep them in this drawer right here.
Okay. It wouldn't have surprised me if you only had a handful.
They're all PM2s also. So
yeah.
I try to have every PM. I got your guys' help too to get them, So I try to keep every PM2, and I use them to test. And I haven't really done any public testing for you guys. Sorry, but it does help me with my consulting work.
I bet, because you have the commonality of the blade shape and the edge geometry, and the fact that it all came from the same factory. It eliminates a lot of variables, I imagine.
Oh, most definitely. I mean, it is a pain to sit there and try to make the same blade. I mean, I do that for Laren. Like all that capture testing, basically all of those little dots you see are from me grinding those out. There's only a handful that I didn't grind just because it was more convenient to have somebody else grind them at the time. I believe the Apex Ultra, I didn't get a chance to grind that one out, but there's very few I didn't grind.
I'd love to venture back to that, but let's wrap up the Sliz Bowie.
Oh, sure.
We'll just wrap this up and move on. Other than being annoying to some, what's the big deal with lock stick? Well, lock stick, it is annoying, and a little bit of a click never bothered me. If a knife is really made precisely perfect and somebody took the time to grind the lock bar face and the lock bar at the same time at the correct angles, you shouldn't have lock stick. So some people will say that lock stick is an indication of a poorly made or poorly engineered knife. I don't think it's fair to take a factory built knife that's mass produced and hold it to the same standard as a handmade knife. It's kind of dumb. Like, why do we do this to ourselves? But at the same time, lock stick can go too far. I had a FFIB K2 Spyderco for a while that took 2 hands to unlock. You could
That
not
one
get
was
the lock bar out.
notorious.
I needed as many fingers on the lock bar as I could get to pop it, and sometimes I'd have to pry it with something like a little piece of wood to pop the knife out. And that's too much. So at some point, the knife becomes unsafe if there's too much lock stick.
That's not lock stick. That's lock.
It's lock. I agree.
Lock.
In all fairness, that was a really badass knife, though. I mean, that was like a gigantic piece of.
I love it so much. I own 2 of them.
Yeah,
I own 2 of them. I love it.
That was like the only 10V you can get for a while too. But yeah, you are correct. That lock stick was really bad.
That one's bad. So I want everybody to understand, though, that the lock bar insert doesn't guarantee that you're not going to have lock stick. What it does do is it allows you to modify and adjust and fine tune the knife. And if you wear it out, you can replace it. So it's a wearable part that can be replaced like a brake pad. Shiro stick. Are Shiros famous for having stick?
No, they have Shiro.
Hey.
It's different because it's a Shiro, so it's supposed to have just a little bit. So it's different somehow.
Oh, like like Striders.
Yes, like Striders.
Yeah, Striders are
It's a safety feature.
right. Safety feature, of course.
What is the gold standard for a lock? Like, what do you guys consider? You guys are like subject matter experts. You guys have tried.
Jason's
like,
got some
that's out
pretty
there.
ridiculous customs that have amazing locks, but of stuff that you can go out and buy, not cheap stuff, but Koenigs. I have never handled a Koenig Arius that didn't have a superb lock. Not just like, okay, they're all just dialed. They're all perfect.
I've handled 100 of them, and I've never had one with the wrong amount of lockup or lock stick, and that's a factory made knife. It does have an insert, but those are hand dialed in by
I got
2
to
people
see
at the factory.
Tom's. Yeah, that was a really badass knife, man. The picture doesn't really do it justice when you actually get a chance to like hold it in your hand. You're like, oh man, that's pretty.
You
That's
spend
pretty
time
cool.
just looking at it and diving into the design, and it's a really well thought out knife. It's a knife that's had 10,000 hours of time in the consideration of how they make it and each step of it.
They didn't exist back in 2017, did they? So there wasn't.
Not
That
like
was
they.
that was
not
the
like-
beginning.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, the knife world was very different back then.
Holtz definitely have wonderful lockups. They don't stick, they don't click. But really what it comes down to is if you get the lock bar geometry correct and you get the lock face geometry correct, then they don't stick.
Well, open and close this one real quick for us, Tom, since yours is put together. The Swish Bowie. Let's check that out. Tell me how it compares to the Goat, the Koenig.
So, it's got. I mean, it's so new that I can't even really say how it's going to end up. But it's just like there's not lock stick. It's just like you can kind of feel it when you press it, just a little bit. Like there's a little bit of initial pressure, but it doesn't like click. It doesn't stick. You can't even hear it. But like Koenig's lock, I mean, they're just. You can't even demonstrate it because it's such a small interface. They just work. There's never any stick. They just kind of move sideways because there's a guy named Garrett that sits next to the front door of Koenig, and his job all day is to sit there and do that. Literally make that lock perfect. So he's done it 10,000
price
times.
difference? What's the price difference between the Swish Bowie and the Koenig for the viewers?
You can get a base Koenig for I don't know how much the prices are now. Probably $780 would probably be a range.
Yeah, I think they're $750 for a base. And that's made in Idaho.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a little bit more. In my opinion, that's not a lot more. That's one more knife more. For Spyderco people, that's 1 to 2 more knives.
Yeah,
but that's essentially what you guys would consider like the perfection. Like if you wanted to experience
not mass market, but of a regular production, you can go get one if you wanted to right now somewhere on the internet. Yeah, that'd be my standard because it's always consistently perfect.
And the
there's
Swish
definitely
buoy is going to give you a
custom.
lot of value, I guess, compared to that. Like you have the Koenig, and then like price difference, and then we still get like good value with the Swish buoy, you guys would say, or
Yeah, I guess that kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier. It's like this that doesn't have to be a price comparison. It can stand on its own at that price. Like it's a good knife at that price. The Koenig's a good knife at this price. Um, you don't have to say I could get this or I could get that when everyone that's buying knives like this gets this and that. The only reason most people can compare the locks between these two knives are the same type of people own more than one knife.
I think you make a good point, Tom. Like on its own merits, the Sliz Bowie is an amazing knife, and I think if you were to hand it to Bill, Bill Koenig himself would say, "I like it." Right? It's not like it's not a either or. But the Bowie has things going for it that the Koenig doesn't. And if I can get this thing finally dialed in, I'll show you. From a size standpoint, Sean, in my opinion, this is like a Goldilocks knife size.
whoa! You just put that thing together just like that?
Yeah, for me to have XL hands and find it comfortable, but then also to give it to somebody with maybe medium-sized hands and have them feel it's comfortable, that's not easy to do. The blade size, I believe, is 3.25 to the tip, 3.3, something like that. So what Tom and I have noticed is that 3-inch knives are generally more popular than 3.5. So that in-between zone makes it happy for everybody. And then in the pocket, this knife is amazing because it's not very thick. Front to
Man, I
back, not
just
so thick.
It's
not
contoured
to change subjects or anything, but man, I just
and it's deep carry.
I learned so much from you guys when it comes to folding knives. It's not even funny. I always feel like sometimes you guys think it's a one-way street where, oh, Sean's Mr. Expert. He's going to teach us.
We do think
No,
it's a one-way street.
No. It's
It
it's
is.
two ways. I learned so much about folding knives from you guys, and then the military group. It's not even funny. Like even just going to Tom's place and checking out those knives in person, I was just like, oh my god. This guy's subject matter expert. That's why it's fun being on here and asking you guys about these lockups and things like that. I mean, I feel like you guys don't get enough credit for what you guys know.
Well, thank you.
All this different
Thank
stuff. Yeah.
I will say that, I mean, you came from the forum, so you can speak to this much better than I joined the Spyderco forum, I think 2017 or 2016, but I'd looked at it forever and I'd looked things up and got frustrated by using a forum and trying to post pictures, all that stuff before Facebook. But then I found Facebook and it was like instant gratification. I could take a picture off my phone and click post, and I didn't have to like upload it to Imager or whatever. I just got to like share this, and that was cool. But the forum still had I felt like this massive amount of knowledge that was not transferring over to the Facebook world. But what the nice thing about the Millie group is I feel like we have now like a platform where it's okay and encouraged to share all this information, because like people act like I teach everybody. I learn shit from the group every single day. Or people like, how's Tom know when everything drops? Because someone posted it in the group and I saw it, so I copied and pasted it to my own page. Like, there's so much information being shared in the group that it's awesome. I take away from it. I'm glad you take away from it, but it's a give and take, and everyone's welcome to participate, which is what I love about this group.
Yeah, I mean, the good thing about forums is if you need to get into really detailed like history and technical information, you could look that up easily. You can, use some fancy Google search bar stuff and type in the forum name and be able to search all that stuff. It's more difficult to do that with the Facebook group. But for the Facebook group, it's easy to just cannonball into the deep end of the pool with the Facebook group. And you guys have it. It's very casual and it's very easy to just jump in there and start sharing stuff with people and getting excited about these things that we all like knives. And then you guys have really fostered a great environment where you guys are both very humble and have a lot of humility. I mean, sometimes what can happen when people start to feel like they know more, they get a little bit of a chip on their shoulder. And, I've been guilty of being a little elitist at times myself, but, it's not helpful for new people. So I've kind of tried to learn to, tone that shit down myself.
I do have a big ego, and I'm a bit of an elitist when it comes to like the culture of the club. So I've had that, I've had that thrown back in my face a few times by people who are like, "Hey, why do you think you're God around here? Why do you act like you're some sort of like who made you king?" Basically, is like the sense that I get from them, and there are times where Tom and I will act unilaterally on something, and we'll just decide like, look, just because I didn't write a rule about it doesn't mean I have to allow it to happen. And so we sometimes crack down or smash on people that deserve it, that are not contributing to like the culture of the group, and they're being some sort of like suck on the positivity, or they're being a downer, or they're constantly just crapping on everything. Like, I don't need you in the community. I came here to get away from my life and enjoy knives with other people that
And
enjoy. I don't
negativity
care
is
about your
significantly
opinion
more
on Joe
powerful.
Biden.
Yeah, negativity is significantly more powerful. So if you let
Right.
it, I mean, it's easy to poison the water well of the whole fucking town, so to
Right.
speak, when it comes to people that are just really fucking toxic. And it's no fucking mystery why people are toxic. I mean, life is crazy fucking stressful. And some
Yeah.
people, a lot of us, especially, men with families and stuff like that, we're kind of like shielding our family from all the negativity. We don't like the shit doesn't go downhill, the shit always goes up, and then you buffer it. And so when you can get to a group where like, people aren't just being super crazy toxic, because some people that they want that as their outlet for all the stuff that they're buffering in their life from their work, their job, their family, and then they feel like that's their outlet for spewing all that negativity and stuff out there. The problem is, fucking ain't no fun to be around.
No.
It's not fun to be around. Keep it to yourself.
Go over to X if you want to argue with the universe. Like, you don't have to do it.
So I for one, I fucking appreciate that you guys do that stuff, because I like the positive environment and atmosphere.
Yeah.
It makes me feel like wanting to share stuff, and I like reading, people's how they like the knives, or hey, check out my knife and my flashlight type thing. And it's like, cool, rock on. That's what it should be. It should be encouraging and enjoying these little things that you get to, purchase with your hard-earned money, and show other people that also like cool shit, hey, look at that, instead of like you show that to people and you get this negative shit from people where they're like, oh, that could have been cool, but you didn't get the fucking turbo clip on there and you're an idiot. Like, okay, fuck you.
It only takes, and I can name one very specific example, but it only takes one person being shitty who has a big personality to ruin the group for 18,000 people. There's people that I can name that made me not enjoy the club, that made me like self-conscious about what I post, made me have to second guess what I thought, made me have to like argue about decisions I made about how the club rules. And when those people got removed from the club, it's like, wow, that one person was destroying this whole club because of their vibe.
Right. Here's one part though that I break my own rule. I do think people are entitled to their opinions. So if somebody jumps in the comment section and starts going, this Liz Bowie's a piece of garbage, and I don't think it's a knife that needs to be remade, and I don't like the way it feels in my hand, and why does a knife of that price have a wire clip? They're entitled to their opinion. Like, I'm not going to throw them out for having an opinion. But
exactly right.
It's the constant negative Nancy's, or the ones that have an agenda to their griping. They're the ones that wear me out.
It's the patterns of behavior. It's not the one few times people do that. And people are entitled to their opinion. It's not fucking North Korea. Like, oh, you disagree with me, fuck off. Like, no, that's not how that works. But yeah, I mean, if you're just a fucking drag to be around, and I'm sure it's not just the group. You're also probably just a drag to be around in person. There's just some people that are just fucking like, you have free will. It's your decision to be like that, but damn, dude, that's just.
I do have to bite my tongue.
Behavior.
I do have to bite my tongue every February when everybody whines about price increases, and all of a sudden I feel like I'm an economist and I'm Thomas Sowell, and I'm having to teach people how the universe works. And what's really weird to me is how many knife fans notice that knife prices go up, but they don't notice anything else in their life.
Well, that's what I want to say, which I think is just fucking hilarious. And let's try to avoid the politics and all that stuff.
That's because the only thing they purchase in their life is knives.
Well, I'm not saying it is.
It's consumerism.
You know, because it's easy to deep dive into that stuff. But what I want to say is like, yeah, you know, your knife prices are going up, your milk prices are going up. Well, guess what? The knife prices are going up because the materials prices are going up. Because in order to keep people out of the poverty line, you have to pay people more to keep them working for you and doing a good quality job. So everything has gone up.
Everyone who works at Spyderco had a 40% increase in the cost of their healthcare because that's what it goes up every year. So that costs more to make the knives because the people are still necessary. The steel got more expensive. The gas costs more to get it to the factory. The steel makers have more costs in their products. Like,
it's brutal. You know, like
everything in the supply chain goes up.
Well, thank God I purchased a lot of my steel before all this craziness had happened. I mean, because I was told by another knife maker, he's like, buy cheap and stack it deep. And, you know, I'm doing custom stuff. I had 2 kids. Like I've kind of slowed down a lot. But at the same time, it's freaking crazy. The price increases for like abrasives, epoxy. You want to buy that new steel, it's going to cost you a lot more. And then people are still racing to the bottom on prices because, you know, there's so much competition for everybody trying to make a knife. It's not even funny. That's why if you're a custom maker, you better be doing the best job possible and showing that you care about the inline user, because there's no room for people that are just half-assing stuff.
That's one reason it took me so long to do anything that was financially beneficial for myself in this industry. After years and years and years of trying to figure it out, I started sharpening. I've figured out that there's a lot of people in the knife world that don't want anyone to make any money off of this hobby in any way, shape, or form. No one's allowed to like benefit from this.
You hit the nail on the head with that. There are some people that they're so scrungy. They get so pissed when somebody is actually just trying to, like, I don't know, like
fucking feed their family,
just fucking provide for themselves with this shit. Like, how dare you? I've run into that myself. Like, I've had several douchebags get super fucking pissed at me when I wanted to go full time with knife making, and like, how fucking dare you not want to share everything that you do that is hard work for free? Like, go fuck yourself. And it's the same thing. You know, I've actually watched your sharpening journey, Tom, and it's been filled with a lot of trials and tribulation of people like, oh, fuck you, man. You're just a collector, man. You can't sharpen. You can't do all that. You're doing it. You know, I went to your place. I went to your place. I've seen your edges and stuff. You're doing a fantastic job, Tom. Keep it up.
Thank you.
Not to mention, your fucking last name is super badass for your brand name, right? More sharp. Of course, I want my knife more sharp.
I have to give Seth Gilman credit for that. Seth Gilman thought of that. I very appreciate that. I love it. I think it's awesome. But yeah, like, I guess back to it. Like, today, I spent 2 hours writing and deleting a response to a comment on my Instagram about someone saying, how dare I charge whatever rate for my repairs. Like, he goes, if you charge $80 an hour for like doing a polished Tonto bevel, it's something I do once every month,
which is a crazy amount of work. And you know, here's what I want to say too: like, the customer, when they're buying a more sharp edge, you're getting a fixed angle sharpening job. It's not a clumsy, you know, belt sharpened, you know, cooking up the edge type sharpening job.
He's not whittling it on a Tormach by hand.
It takes a while to sit there and get that dead flat with a fixed angle sharpening. There's nobody that does commercial sharpening with a fixed angle system. No. It's not going to happen. It's far too time consuming for the race to the bottom on prices. I mean, prices are usually $5-10 for sharpening. And so because of that, you have to use a belt sharpener to do that stuff. The problem is customers who got these crazy knives, crazy like $800, $500, $300 knives, you don't want to send it to those guys. Those guys butcher knives. How many times do we see those pictures of the recurve they put in there, or they're sitting there sharpening on an angle grinder because they're sharpening it for $3 a pop, right?
By the way, I used to work for a company that charged $450 for a knife sharpening. The goal was to do 28 an hour.
No. So you're spending. So you may be dropping. You know, I don't know what your prices are, Tom, but I imagine they're anywhere from $30 to $50. But it's a good deal because, one, you already put in a ton of money on your knife. You're getting it dead flat with that fixed angle sharpening system, so that when they even just want to maintain it with stropping, you know, you should be telling them, hey, get that gunny juice, put that on leather. I'm setting your edge. You just have to maintain this with stropping. as the edge is dead, it's actually like that. It's not this convex thing
Yeah.
dull really easily. Dead flat, and as they strop it, it starts convexing more and more. But the flatter those bevels are, the more edge retention you're going to get, the more stropping you're going to be able to get out of it before they have to send it back. And it just looks gorgeous. I mean, come on.
That's part of what I sell.
Send this
Like,
stuff
I
out
don't
there.
hide that.
Yeah.
Like, I do edges on literal $2,000 knives on a fairly regular basis. People, believe it or not, like to take pictures of their fancy knives, and they like to have a nice looking edge on it. And that's not something to be poo-pooed. So it was just really maddening, like dealing with this guy today and thinking through all the time, like, okay, how do I quantify the 7 years I spent building this Instagram account so I can
Here's
get
what you
exposure,
do.
so I can
Not to
spend
cut
3
you
hours a
off,
day
Tom.
advertising.
Well, hold on a sec. Not to cut you off, Tom, but here's what you do. Just ignore it. Like, you don't have time for that. The problem is we have a negative bias. Whatever we're dealing with people, we always zero in on the one negative guy. Ignore that shit because, being on the internet and being public with the internet, not to piss anybody off, but it's not for pussies. You have to just deal with the brunt of bullshit that you're going to deal with. And the problem is that the reality is nobody's ever envious of losers. I'm going to say that again. Nobody has ever been envious of a loser. You're always dealing with people. The people that are always shitting on you, they're never doing more than you. And so it's just a matter of fact, they're dealing with their life, their bullshit, and their way of like processing them not being where they want to be is to take a giant dump on you.
It's like P. Diddy said, they got a PhD, Tom, player hating disease.
That's right, dude. So
timely reference. You're welcome.
Keep up the good work. I've been to your place. I've seen your edges. You're doing a good job, man.
Thank you.
If I wasn't into sharpening and I didn't want to, because that's what it comes down to. It's like, man, I don't want to geek out on all that stuff. I just like the knives. I just fucking send it to you, man. Make it look cool.
Well, all you savages are welcome to do it yourself. Go buy yourself a $300 sharpener, get $700 worth of strops and diamond stones.
Oh, you don't need to do that stuff, man. You just turn your cup upside down. You sharpen on your cup, man. I don't know what you said.
Find 350 knives to practice on, and then you'll be as good as Tom, and you can do it for free.
That's right.
Because it's free. Doesn't cost free.
There's no way to ever bring that up without somebody who wants to talk about being able to do it on the bottom of their cup too.
Right.
Okay, fucking cool. Yeah, I know you can get your knife to like cut stuff.
That works on your Sodbuster Junior really well.
Yeah, well, there is a difference. There is a difference in the amount of edge retention, the beauty, the quality of the edge that you get from putting in more time. The problem is with knife sharpening, since there's no discretion from the casuals out there that have just a surface level interest in it. There's no difference to them when it comes to the little details that they don't understand. They think, oh, it's a ripoff, getting that. If you had a chance to do them side by side and see, you definitely would see the difference.
Well, got spicy. Let's back up to something that you hit on earlier that I think everyone in this audience is going to want to know about. You happen to be a secret weapon for Dr. Laren Thomas, founder of KnifeSteelNerds.com. All of you have a copy of his sharpness chart or your edge retention chart at some point. You have a copy of his toughness chart. You've all seen it. And it turns out that Sean is integral to that process. So you were talking about sharpening the samples for him. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I mean, right when that project was kicking off, I mean, I was given 48 blank coupons to grind out and get them all the same. And it was incredibly stressful because I realized it was on my shoulders to make sure that if there was any heat when it came to this project about this not being done right or this, this is not going to work, it would be on me, but I figured like people, at the time I was a really good sharpener and, I was making knives and stuff. So people would understand like, okay, if Sean's doing it, then we could probably trust that information because, Laren is a doctor. He's made knives and stuff before, but people don't really consider Laren like a knife maker. He could make a knife, he's grown up with knives. He's done knife stuff longer than me. It's just, I focused more on making knives and sharpening and really geeking out on that. So that was a really intense project. It took me a while to get it done. I think Laren has always been amazing with his work ethic and always just being able to crush things and get them out the door really quickly. He's got an amazing work ethic. For me, I really get sometimes hung up on the details of things, and it was really stressful to get those 48 blanks and grind them out, make sure they were all ground to 3 degrees per side. And then they all had to be done with a 15-degree per side edge. Well, the problem was when I first got started with that was I was a freehand sharpener. And I was a lot more of an elitist douchebag about freehand. And unfortunately, I talked to Laren. He's like, if you're going to be a part of this project, dude, you're going to have to do a fixed ankle. And I'm like, are you serious? He's like, I'm dead serious.
Remove the variables.
I'm spending a lot of money on this, Sean. I'm paying you to do that shit. And I didn't do all that shit for free. Some people are like, Sean's a fucking saint. He did that shit for free. Well, no, motherfucker. The belts cost something. What the fuck are you talking about? Some of these blades, they costed about like 5-6 belts. And those are anywhere from $4 to $10 a pop, depending on what belt brand I'm using. And so no fucking way am I eating that cost. And, I'm married. I have a family and stuff. What, you want me to be fucking divorced living in a shed or something? My wife wouldn't take that shit. So,
Sean, just for reference, how much is a belt?
A belt, it depends on what brand you get. I mean, I like to use the VSM. I believe it's the 885, the 855. I can't remember, but it's a ceramic plus belt, Y-weight backing. And that belt can cost about $5-6. If you go with like a Norton Blaze belt, it can cost about $10. I mean, the price can be different. I like to go with True Grit. They're like the leader when it comes to low pricing and belts that you can buy in bulk. But if you go off of like Amazon or something, I mean, some of these really high-end belts, you're looking at $15 a pop. And
just for reference, everybody, like he just said, 4 to 5 belts doing one sample. Okay.
Yeah,
in
the
in the manufacturing world, you would do that times 6. So whatever the cost of the goods are, you would multiply by 6, and that's where you would figure out what the customer would pay, right?
It's fucking crazy. Yeah, it's insane actually, because we're only grinding a 2.5-inch blade on there. But we're taking, sometimes like 5/32 to 1/8 of an inch thickness of the blade, and we have to grind it 3 degrees per side to a 10,000th of an inch, that's thin enough to cut it. That's thin enough that if there's no edge on there, you can cut a potato with that. That's for reference. That's thin enough that if there's no edge on there, you can cut stuff like potatoes and things like that. For other things like cutting paper, you need to have an edge on there to actually cut the paper and slice. But for like things like root vegetables like carrots and potatoes, like, they start to fracture when you put force on them. So 10,000ths of an inch will do. But yeah, that took a lot of belts because, I had an extreme responsibility to make sure that I am not the cause of why this is not performing as it should, from basically micro tempering the edge area when you're grinding that thin.
Yeah,
so
I know.
If the belt felt like it was smoothing and not cutting and burnishing, I'd just switch the belt. I didn't give a fuck about the cost of it. It's like whatever science needs, I will do it. And you kind of need people like that to be in charge of stuff like that. You don't want some fucking dummy that's going to be grinding stuff till it turns blue, and be like, I'm trying to make this one belt work. It's like, that's cool, dude. I'm glad you're saving money, but now we can't trust these fucking results. So you need somebody that's scrupulous.
A sharp belt removes material. A dull belt will burnish it. So you're polishing it, which changes the hardness, which potentially ruins the temper because it gets hot.
Even with water, you're also, even with water, I think that's the one thing. That's the one problem. It's really difficult to get in these nuances with the public, or even just people that think they know everything. So the problem is you get some people that just get a little. There's kind of a Dunning-Kruger effect where you get some people that they feel like they know a lot because they're just starting to get into it. You know what I mean? It takes a while. You go through the valley of despair, and you come at the other end where you're like, I know stuff, but I'm a little more kind of cautious about sharing some of the details because, there's kind of a lot of things, what you don't know type thing. But when it comes to that, when it comes to the dull belt, it's not just the heat, but the fact that you have dull abrasive grains that are causing deformation. They're not removing the material. They're causing more deformation of the material, which is causing more stress buildup at the grind. So it's pretty fucking serious, but that's kind of too much to share with the public because they're just processing, and they've been processing for the past 20 years now, heat buildup with grinding.
Yep.
So they're already, for the past 20 years, when that information came out, people have been crucified. It's almost been like Seymour Wise, the guy who was telling doctors they needed to wash hands. And that guy got crucified for basically trying to tell people, hey, look, there's these invisible microscopic things. You need to wash your hands because people are dying. And that guy got crucified. He wasn't very polite about how he was going about it. He was like, I'm right. You're fucking wrong. Wash your fucking hands. Because babies were dying. They were having problems with doctors when they're delivering babies. They were dying. But with midwives and stuff like that, who weren't playing with cadavers and things like that and not washing their hands and touching newborn babies, the midwives were having less deaths. And then Seymour Wise was like, basically like, well, we're not having those problems if you wash your fucking hands. But he got crucified for that. And it's kind of the same thing with the heat buildup. So why would I even talk about deformation from dull grains causing stress buildup? Because it's too much for people to fucking handle.
Sean, I have 2 visual aids that I would love for you to take us through. I think that
Sure.
this audience needs to see this, and your explanation will matter more than mine. And I've said it many times, but coming from you, it'll matter. I want to show people some pictures of D2 and then CPM
pretty
D2.
gnarly. Okay.
Can you explain to the crowd why this is less desirable than that in terms of toughness and edge retention?
Well, this is fairly basic stuff here, but I've been surprised actually by showing the micrographs to people. I always felt like this is pretty obvious stuff, but some people are kind of overwhelmed when they look at these pictures of these steels. So I should probably explain what's going on with this micrograph here.
Yes, please. What's the
in
frog
the bottom,
shape thing in the middle?
Well, we'll get to that, but first off, what I want to tell people is the bottom right corner actually is very important. That's the scale bar, and it'll tell you in sometimes in mm, which is millimeters, but in that means microns. It's important for putting the context of how much magnification there is. Usually when you see a 20 micron scale bar that size, that's about 1,000 power magnification. And so what we're looking at here is you see all this busyness and you're like, I don't understand what I'm looking at. What you really need to look at, what this micrograph is trying to highlight, is they take a surface, they polish it down, and then they etch it with like a type of acid that eats down the matrix and reveals these carbides. All steels are a mixture of carbon and iron, but you're always usually going to have carbides inside of these knife steels that we like to use. So these white features right here, that's all you should be focusing on when you're looking at this micrograph. You shouldn't be looking at the busyness and fuzziness of the background there, because that's not what we're trying to highlight with this particular etch. We're burning down the matrix and we're trying to look at these carbides here. And so these white features here are actually gigantic. This is D2 chromium carbides. We know they're chromium carbides because the chemistry of D2. And typically you can look up a lot of literature that will say that that's what these are. These are chromium carbides. And we could see right here is that these are incredibly large. That's 20 microns right there, the scale bar there. And a red blood cell, for reference, is about 8 micron. You can't see a red blood cell. But, for reference, a lot of PM steel carbides are pretty fine. A lot of them are well under 10 microns. A lot of them are well under the size of a red blood cell. But with these carbides, you can see they're incredibly large. And what we also see is they're elongated. They look like long, like sticks in some cases. They're all kind of going from a left and right elongation. And that's because when the steel is basically taken from molten steel and poured and cast into an ingot, and then it's rolled out, the surface is stretched as they try to take this thick billet from the ingot and stretch it out into bar stock sizes that we can use to make knives. Well, that actually elongates and stretches these carbides right here. So we can see we have these elongated carbides that are going in the direction that the steel was actually hot rolled, which essentially is like a type of forging. And so we could see in the finished condition in the knife, we have these elongated carbides. Carbides are not the same features of the matrix of the steel. They're actually significantly more brittle. They're harder, so they contribute to the knife being able to cut longer in some cases, but they're also significantly more brittle. So the bigger they are and the more stresses we put on them, especially at a thin cross section of an edge, which can be of a nanometer section that's in M, that's significantly finer than the micron. It takes 1,000 nanometers to make 1 micron. Problem there is now it's a lot easier to break out that edge.
Yep.
You have less toughness at the edge, but also the bulk blade material is going to be easier to fracture and break because we have these pockets here. We have these big elongated brittle regions. They're harder. They'll last longer when it comes to wearing and rubbing on the surface. But if we put shock load on that, it's easier for it to basically the cracks to connect between the carbides to break, and then cracks through the matrix kind of to connect between carbides and for it to break out. So those are gigantic carbides. That's why, you know, some people may feel like that D2 has maybe more edge aggression. There's no measurement for edge aggression currently. There's testing that's being done right now to figure that out. But the D2 that's not CPM, it's significantly larger in size. So when we're looking at that as a lay person, we should be able to see these white blobs are really big. We look at the scale bar in the bottom right. We look at these big blobs, and we can know as a fact this material is gonna have more wear resistance, but it's not going to have as much toughness.
So if we think about the steel in your knife blade, the vast majority of that steel is iron, and the hardness of iron is approximately around 40. Isn't that right on a HRC? If I were just to have a block of iron.
I mean, it's not just pure iron. I mean,
Right.
there's carbon in solution with it. It's making a different structure. It's making that tempered martensite in our knife blades. So,
right.
I mean, that could be pretty hard. That could be anywhere from 65, 66, 67 Rockwell, sometimes maybe 70 Rockwell, depending on how much carbon is in solution with that iron to make the tempered martensite.
So the point I'm making is that if we made an iron knife blade, we would find that it would be really insufficient for being a knife because the iron itself is not hard enough. So we add additional elements to the iron to create the steel, and then the element blend will determine what the steel ultimately is, right? In the case of D2, for example, we see these large carbides, just like Sean described. They're basically a much harder substance that's in the matrix of the steel. So as you described, the hardness is nice because hard stuff holds an edge better, but also they can be brittle. So the brittleness creates a problem where these things can crack and fracture inside the steel. Is that accurate?
Yeah. These little white blobs you see, they're significantly stiffer than the tempered martensite and the matrix surrounding them. So it's a lot easier when enough energy is sent through them. They're more likely to crack when it goes past the yielding point versus with the tempered martensite. It's going to be, it'll have a little bit of more ductility, plasticity to it versus the carbides. They don't have that.
So what happens if I take those carbides and I make them much smaller and I distribute them more evenly through the steel matrix? What effect does that have? And what do we call that? We call that particle metallurgy. Isn't that right?
Yeah. So instead of taking the steel and just cooling it, basically from molten steel and pouring the ladle into like a shape, like a big square to make a big billet, they actually take the steel, and it's a very fancy process where they atomize it like a little spray mister. And each little droplet is like its own ingot and cools. And then all the basically steel particles, they solidify when they have gas blowing as it's going from molten steel through an atomizer and gas blowing little individual ingots with each little droplet, and they collect all the powder at the bottom. And then from there, what they try to do is they take all that powder, they collect it, and then they repress it with what they call hipping or hot isostatic pressure, where they have this big canister, and they take the canister and they apply heat and they compress it, and they try to basically get it to solidify again. But then it's further solidified with more of the porosity, or basically little gaps in between, reduced by hot rolling it, which is like forging it. And then they anneal it, and then we buy it as bar stock, and it'll have these much finer carbides right here because the carbides didn't get a chance to grow from the slow cooling of the ingot because it was rapidly cooled. So these carbides didn't get a chance to grow from the molten condition. And so we have much finer carbides here, but let's not kid ourselves with CPMD2. These carbides aren't as fine as something that has maybe vanadium carbides and things like that, because those carbides are going to be significantly finer even with the same PM process, which is very interesting. So CPMD2 it'll give you more toughness, but it looked like with the Catra edge retention testing, it didn't necessarily translate to more edge retention between D2 and CPMD2 because the carbides are still the same hardness. And
right.
Technically, I believe they're still at the same volume, but it turned out the toughness was increased because we have more. It's more homogeneous. We have less non-uniformity throughout the matrix, where you have areas of just hard carbide, then matrix, and then hard carbide. It's more kind of evenly dispersed throughout. So there is an advantage of the CPM D2, but the problem is it's going to cost more because that's a whole elaborate, highly specialized process that they're running that steel through. They can make 10 times more steel if they don't do the CPM process versus when they do. So when you do the CPM process and you're buying a knife, and it's not just the CPM process, Bowler, they have their 3rd gen, powder metallurgy, Carpenter, their 2nd gen. Don't get too hung up on the different generations of powder metallurgy. But when you're getting the particle metallurgy, you're enhancing the toughness for that level of chemistry. It's not necessarily going to always make it tougher than a steel that's maybe an ingot steel, because it's kind of chemistry dependent. If we have less carbide, we're going to have more toughness. But the problem is, if we have less carbide, you're going to have less wear resistance. And for the end user, it means that your working edge is going to blunt completely smooth. When you're cutting cardboard and stuff, it's going to just start sliding and slipping. So the secret is not just dropping carbide volume and making it so I have 1% carbide volume, and then I increase the rock wall hardness to 65. Now I got the ultimate blade. Well, no, because there's nothing kind of pumping the brakes on the edge, just simply wearing completely smooth.
Yeah.
So we're kind of stuck with trying to mix and match depending on how our edges are failing for the best result.
I know a lot of people that chase the low cost knives. They'll see D2 on the blade and they'll get excited and they'll go, well, that's an upgrade from the standard steel. But I'd point out to everybody that D2 steel has approximately the same hardness as Maximate. And I don't think anyone here would say that Maximate is
or
superior
toughness,
steel.
You would say, right? Yeah, you're looking at the toughness. It looks like here, the sharp.
Did I misspeak? Yeah, toughness.
Yeah, you said the hardness. Yeah, I mean,
I'm sorry.
Maximate's clearly going to get significantly harder.
True.
But Jason's example is people. Since I've been into knives, I don't own any D2 knives. Spyderco, as far as I know, doesn't make anything that I've owned that makes it D2. People have always said, but it's tough. That's a tough steel. Look at it.
To Sean's point, D2 is not. Yeah. It's not tough, but CPM D2 is considerably tougher. So we're going from the range of 5 to 4 all the way up to maybe 12 on the toughness scale. So a comparable steel would be Venatus 8. It's actually tougher than 10V. It's not quite as tough as 4V, V4E, excuse me. It's in the range of M4. So CPM D2 is a significantly tougher steel than D2, and it's courtesy of that particle metallurgy process. That's really what I wanted to show everybody so they understand what that CPM thing is. I think everyone knows the initials, but they don't really know why it's better and what effect it has.
Yeah, crucible particle metallurgy. That's what that stands for. And yeah, you're going to get more toughness compared to the same steel without it, if they make a steel that's an analog without the particle metallurgy process. But we're definitely jumping down a rabbit hole, that's for sure.
So let's find the edge retention.
Sure.
Let's see if we can find the data. So it looks like D2 is around 450 to 500, or 475 to 500, depending on the hardness. You'll notice, guys, as the hardness increases on the knife steel, the edge retention goes up. But back here on our toughness, as the hardness increases, what do we notice? That it always trends down in toughness. So you can have tough, and you can have tough, or you can have edge retention, but it's difficult to have both at the same time.
And here's some nuances here too. I mean, here we don't have conditions that are heat treated poorly necessarily. Like sometimes you can have something that is harder that can be tougher too, depending on how it's heat treated. And sometimes you can have something that's
Hey, Jason.
Yes.
Scroll back up a little bit to the very top of this graph. Keep on. Whoa, it gets way up there. Some cool steels up at the top of this graph.
Oh, wait, there's more. Oh, look, there's oh my goodness. Yep.
So back down a little bit. We would be remiss if there's people that have been waiting for over an hour now to hear about a steel that's coming up on that graph right there. So maybe we can continue this, but we'll give these people a break and let's let it go. Let's let the cat out of the bag.
Shall we talk about M398, Tom?
I think we should talk about M398.
I think that would be lovely.
I think we can use this as a good example of a high edge retention steel and some of the nuances that Sean can talk about or willing to talk about or wants people to know about what to expect on the club knife.
Sean, you want to tell us a little bit about M398?
M398, you would think, is basically M390 2.0. I think the problem with thinking about it that way is you're basically not understanding that M398 takes what M390 is doing and makes it an extreme, which means that you will get an extreme benefit when it comes to edge retention, but you're also going to lose some toughness. There's no getting around that. And I think that that's something that nobody wants to hear. Everybody wants to hear that they can get more edge retention with free launch. Nothing works like that. I'm sorry. But the idea is that I think for the longest time, people have really been enjoying steels like M390, S90V, S110V. But there's always been kind of that guy in the corner that we always look at and we're like, where's S125V? Do they still make it? They still make that material. It's just, it's so insanely difficult to work with it's not difficult to work with if you're making 5 knives out of it. If you're making 10,000 knives out of it, you're going to start running into some problems. And so that's kind of what happens with steels like that, why you don't see it. Now, Spyderco has in the past, they made a limited run of CPM S125V militaries that they gave to people that worked for Crucible. And they only made a handful of them. And it was extremely difficult to work with.
Sal showed a picture of one once on the Spyderco forum.
That's right. Yeah, that was from Scott Devana. He actually got one. And I was like, dude, that's cool. Why don't you show me a picture of it? Because that's pretty rare. I don't think anyone really knows about that. So yeah, Spyderco has worked with materials like that, but people don't have any frame of reference of how insanely difficult that is to work with. Anytime you're going up to about, you have matrix and carbide, and so with steels like S30V, usually around like 15, 16%. All the mid-range steels are about 15, 16% carbide volume. And it's not just the carbide volume. I mean, you have harder carbides. So sometimes, essentially with Magna Cut, we only have 8%. That's why Magna Cut's able to punch so far up its weight. It only has 8%, but they're all the harder carbides. Carbides have hardnesses to them depending on the chemistry of the steel. The carbides will have a chemistry. Vanadium carbides are always going to be significantly harder than chromium carbides.
If we could pause for a minute, please, for the benefit of the audience, guys. When we talk about carbides, you might think carbide means carbon. Carbide really, to me, it means anything that's added to the steel that's not necessarily iron, with the purpose of making the edge.
It's a mixture of metallic element and carbon.
Right.
So if the metallic element is not in solution with iron and the carbon is not in solution with iron, then basically the metallic elements that are left over or undissolved after heat treatment, they stay locked together. So you have carbon and the metallic elements that we have in steel, such as tungsten, vanadium, even titanium, things like that, which we don't see in steel because they're too strong of a carbide former. But those will be locked together to make carbides. And those are those little white dots you guys see in these pictures right here.
When you guys hear the term 10V, they call it 10V because approximately 10% by weight of the steel matrix is vanadium. So the vanadium is a carbide in the purpose of a knife. In the knife world,
it's a carbide forming element. Yeah, I mean there is some vanadium that's in solution, but the thing about it that's confusing is you don't get 10%. There's 10% vanadium. We get 10% vanadium carbide. It doesn't work like that. There's actually 17% vanadium carbide in 10V. So that's kind of how detailed it's working. It's kind of confusing. It's not intuitive.
Right.
You have to have some background information to know how much volume is inside the steel because it's not from looking at the chemistry of the steel that you know exactly how much carbide volume there is. So if you see 10% vanadium, it doesn't mean that there's 10% carbide volume. There's 17% in 10V.
So when we talk about the carbide content of the steel, one thing Sean has mentioned earlier is like as a percentage of the steel.
And hold on a second. We don't actually use moles. We actually use hardness Vickers. Moles hardness is that's like scratch. It doesn't give you enough detail about how much significantly harder vanadium carbide is compared to chromium carbide. We don't use the mole scale. We use hardness Vickers. We don't use hardness HRC. We can convert it to that, But we don't, because the hardness HRC is like, that's more for like bulk hardness. We want to use micro hardness, like micro Vickers and things like that. So hardness Vickers, vanadium carbide is 2,800 hardness Vickers. And that's significantly harder than chromium carbide, which can be anywhere from 1,800 to 2,200 hardness Vickers. It depends on the chemistry of the chromium carbide, also the direction. It's anisotropic, meaning depending on what direction you measure it, it could be harder in one direction versus another, because we're getting down to the atomic scale and things are kind of wacky. But that's why it's difficult to get truly concrete hardness values if we really get into the weeds with it, and we start getting into the stoichiometry of these carbides. But the point is that vanadium carbides they're always going to be harder than chromium carbides. And it has to do with the fact that vanadium is a much stronger carbide former. It wants to match up more with that carbon. So we have more of an equal balance between the vanadium and the carbon, which are forming more bonds. And when you think of these bonds that are being formed inside of the carbide, it's almost like springs. And so the more of these bonds that we have, the more of these elastic springs that we have. So when we're putting force on that carbide, it's more resistant. Versus when we get into the chromium carbides and sometimes some of the iron tungsten carbides, they're significantly softer.
So one of the things that's particularly interesting about M398 is that if you take the chromium carbides and the vanadium carbides and you add them together, you reach 30% carbide, which is a crazy number. It's higher than any other steel you guys have in your drawer, unless you happen to have a 125V. But I doubt 3 of you have a 125V. So this steel is particularly loaded with chromium. They just poured the crap out of it in it, didn't they?
They did. They certainly did. And these aren't just like regular chromium. They're basically vanadium doped. So they're a little bit harder than your just pure vanadium carbide. And we'd also have about 5-6% of the vanadium carbide hanging out. That's a very hard particle in there. But what I thought was neat about this material was the fact that we had mostly these vanadium-rich chromium carbides, which are going to be a little bit easier to sharpen technically than just having majority vanadium carbide. But the problem is chromium carbide is usually always larger than vanadium carbide. So I believe S125V is going to have a little bit finer carbide. But when it came to how aggressive of an edge that M398 could take, I thought that was pretty exciting on my custom knives, and I thought that was a pretty cool material.
So when you compare 125V to M398, you're going to find less vanadium, more chromium, and you're saying that the edge is more aggressive?
Between the two, they're both very aggressive, I would find. They're pretty similar, actually, in their kind of edge characteristics, but technically, depending on heat treatment, you can have one tougher than the other. I believe that the S125V is still less tough than M398, but M398, it's certainly not going to be a tough material because the majority of the matrix is going to be carbide.
Right. So that brings us to the club knife. It's a PM2 with M398 steel. The only time you guys have seen M398 from Spyderco has been a Mule Team knife. And around the time the Mule came out, there it is. Around the time the Mule came out, Sean Houston got involved with the heat treatment of the M398 to see if there was any way to optimize the steel and make it a little bit more, I don't know, just dialed in. Like you obviously optimized the 15V knives that came out. So those even feature your logo, which is pretty badass. It's not a small thing to have a logo on a knife from Spyderco.
Yeah,
so
I'm very grateful for that.
It's pretty cool. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you found with the M398, if you can? Perhaps you can't. Sean's gonna pour a drink. Yeah, so Sean was involved in the M398 steel. He hopefully gave it his blessing and managed to sip without showing his poker hand. All right, boys, we're in a zone here. I'm going to back out. We're going to bail out. But I happen to know that Sean was involved. I'm grateful for his help. And for those of you who end up getting one, you're going to love it, I'm sure.
Maybe I was, maybe I wasn't. I think one
A
of the things
conversation was had. Can we say a conversation was had?
One of the things I've been privileged with is being able to work with Spyderco on these really sensitive areas. And I think one of the reasons why they still work with me is because of my discretion. So it takes a special kind of person, I think, to work with some of that stuff and not just blab about every fucking detail.
It's a good point. I found that needles under the fingernails will get nothing out of Sean. So he's a man of discretion.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I work with Spyderco. I work with people like Laren, and I don't
Sure.
the spotlight. I don't need to shout from the mountaintops everything I'm fucking doing. And I think, what was it? when they're putting somebody on the moon, what was his name? They had Buzz Aldrin, and was it
Stanley Kubrick?
Yeah, exactly right. Lance Armstrong, and there was a documentary that was on YouTube. I don't know how true it was, but they were talking about how they wanted the first person on the moon to be somebody that was like extremely humble and had humility, because if they came back from the moon, they didn't need somebody that was just going to be going crazy, going to every bar. And I was the person that landed on the fucking moon. They didn't need somebody like that was going to be a problem like that would embarrass the entire program. They needed somebody that was just going to be kind of just nonchalant, a little chill.
One small step for man.
Yeah, right. That can really go to your fucking head. That could really go to your head to be the first person. Now, what I do is not that fucking significant, but all I'm trying to say is that, yeah, you kind of need to be a little chill about shit.
Given your vast wisdom and expertise, I think any rational, sensible knife maker out there would do well to consult with you and maybe pour a drink and have a conversation. So we'll just assume that's what happened and we'll move on. But I'm definitely excited to put that M398 in everyone's hands, because you guys, we've been planning this for years. It's been a long time coming. We're super excited about being able to bring a knife steel out on a platform that everybody knows well, where there's 57 other varieties that you can choose from, and you get to try it yourself, and you get to see whether you love it. And I think you're going to love it. I think. Yeah, Sean, maybe you can talk about this. How would we describe the edge retention experience? And maybe
here's what I'll say about it. Sometimes when you try to please everybody, you please nobody.
I agree.
So a lot of the things I've seen with Magna Cut has done everything it's been advertised to be.
Yes,
it's trying to do a lot of different things and be a balanced material. It's an amazing material. We've never had anything that's been sort of like a hybrid between stainless steel, really stainless steel, and tool steel. There's always been this like, well, you need to get rid of the stainless feature to get the toughness of tool steel. And so with Magna Cut, it's kind of like, oh my God, it kind of the bridge between worlds type thing. But what I've noticed is like, and it could just be like people getting fatigued from all the different advertising for Magna Cut, or people say, we got Magna Cut, but it still does everything it was designed to do. It's designed to be pretty tough. Designed to have really good corrosion resistance, which was a big surprise, good edge retention, and be a bitch between worlds. But, there's a lot of people like, oh, it's not doing this as much as I want. It's not doing that as much as I want. Well, when you start getting into more extremes of things, that's when you start seeing like this type of synergy where it's like, holy shit, I'm noticing that's like cutting a really long time. The problem is, like, for that one guy who's experiencing that badass synergy of like, this thing's kicking ass, there's another guy. It's like sports cars. The car is going in a straight line really fucking fast. And you're like, holy fuck, that's badass. The other guy is like, it's kind of bumpy.
Right.
It's like, this isn't getting good gas mileage. Yeah, the gas mileage sucks. Man, I'm trying to put groceries in the back of the car. There's not a lot of room.
I can't tell my best boat with this.
Yeah, that guy needs a fucking minivan. You know what I mean? Right. Like, cool.
Ease of sharpening is the most important attribute of any steel, obviously.
I'm probably the worst person to ask about
34
that.
pages of VG10.
Yeah, not to cut guys off about that. I'm the worst guy to ask about that, because I feel like ease of sharpening is just like there's how to sharpen and you don't. So fucking ease of sharpening is kind of bullshit as far as I'm concerned, because I feel like that's people, they're trying to use what they think they should be able to use, whatever abrasive for the material, and they should be able to do swipes on each side until it gets sharp. And as you know, you do sharpening and stuff, Tom. I mean, we're going until we make a burr, and then we're going the other side. We're making a burr. And
Someone
then
had a
we're
post
moving.
about ease of sharpening, like the Blade HQ graphs that are the diamond or whatever. And
Oh yeah,
I was starting to think
I hate
about
that
it.
chart
Like,
so much.
I will say, like 15V, what I consider ease of sharpening is how easy it is for me to know that I'm done. So 15V forms a very distinctive burr for me very quickly, very easily when it's apex. S35VN on Chris Reeve knives, I will sit there for fucking ever trying to get an apex on it. That to me is ease of sharpening, is ease of how I know I'm being done.
and
But
that's
it's
what
not
I did.
hard to do.
That's what I did with the heat treat. You know, that's what it came down to, was making sure that it did that for people. But the problem is you need prerequisites to understand what the fuck I was doing with the microstructure and heat treatment of that steel, right? You'd have to know how to fucking sharpen. You're not just like sitting there like, all right, I'm gonna take this edge and just until it gets sharp. Man, it ain't working. What the fuck? He said this was easy to sharpen. Well, you know, take your Arkansas stone, throw it away. Go get a good CBN or bonded diamond stone and, you know, sharpen one side, match the bevels, get them even, burr on each side, remove the burr. As you were saying too, half the problem is with these steels with junk microstructure, trying to remove that burr is a pain in the ass. So when I got it, I was a sharpener before I got into knife making. And I noticed that, what the hell? Like some of these, the same steel, it's easier to sharpen on this one or the other one. And it's not just Rockwell hardness. Rockwell hardness, you know, I have a Rockwell tester right here. I wish it was as simple as telling people they needed to just go higher in hardness, because it's not. If it was that easy, I'd be preaching that from the mountains. Hey, it has to be 63. You know, it's like, it doesn't work like that. If it did, I'd be the first to tell you. But it's the microstructure that's making up that hardness, you know. And so, like, when it came to the 15V, what I did for you guys, why I have my logo on the side of the blade, is I got that steel to sharpen really, really good. And I got it to basically remove the burr, to apex properly and things like that. It's a very difficult steel to sharpen. And so a lot of people were having problems with it, like crumbling, the edge falling apart, stuff like that. People like, this isn't going to work in the knife format. It's too much carbide volume at 23%. It was a heat treat issue. And so we got that dialed in. We got the good microstructure with lower amounts of retained austenite, which is a huge problem with a lot of these steels. Retained austenite, it's a big problem for trying to get a really good edge and getting the burr to come off and things like that. And so we got that figured out, and we got that to Spedico, and that's why my logo's on the side of the blade. But that's pretty nuanced. I don't really know how to explain that to people in a really simple way, you know. Because you got to understand sharpening and burr removal and a little bit of metallurgy to understand what features we were trying to eliminate.
Yeah, I always feel like a phony, like I haven't sharpened enough. Because people ask me questions like, well, what's your favorite steel to sharpen? I'm like, they're all kind of the same. Like Maximate, if I had to pick one that's a bit different, Maximate's a bit different, but still sharpens fine. It's just steel to steel with good abrasives. You can cut this stuff. And like you're saying, like you designed it to be sharp. You were successful. This is not a hard steel to sharpen, but I also have good stones. So if you have good stones, this is a simple steel to sharpen.
You got to get the good stones. I think the problem is we can't even really discuss this to a lot of people, because a lot of people are like, oh, you're just trying to sell stones, or you're just trying to do that. You're trying to hype this stuff. It's like, I swear to God, if you didn't know anything about this stuff and in a blind test, if we gave you the 15V and good stones and you sharpen it, you will see the difference. Like it's a fact. There's enough of it out there now. Trust me, I thought when I was creating this stuff and creating the heat treat, I thought I was going crazy. And I thought maybe it was just in my head. I've really felt a considerable amount of validation from you guys out there buying it and sharpening it and telling me your experiences. And, you know, there's been negative people too. You know, of course, how can you do anything without there being a negative person? If you got a negative people out there, it means you're on the right track. It means you're getting enough of it out there for people to actually give a shit. But the positive response has been overwhelming, drowning out all the negative people. Just negative people for fucking anything. Negative people. Oh, you mean I gotta wipe my ass? It'll be negative about anything. But the positive people have been like, wow, I really see the difference. It's really easy to sharpen. So it's kind of a knee-jerk reaction to be like, if the steel's really hard, got more carbide in it, it's difficult to sharpen. It's like, well, if you don't know how to sharpen, of course. If you do know how to sharpen, you know about raising a burr, removing a burr, you know about using, basically, we already talked about carbide hardnesses and how carbide's this hard, you're sharpening stones that hard. How is it ever going to try to sharpen that if you're stone is this hard and your carbides are that hard. Oh my God, this is fucking genius. If it's harder than the shit inside the fucking steel, it's going to sharpen it.
Yep.
It's not fucking a conspiracy. You know,
Right.
it's just, it's a fact. It's just, that's hard. It's hard. You did it hard, you sharpen it. You know what I mean? Like, we don't have to be material scientists to know that.
I'm
And
kind of
there's
aware
only
of
good
this.
stones
I'm
that
aware
are
of this. I'm aware of this argument outside of our group, but I think in our group, everybody's using good stones and they understand that bad sharpeners don't work. But
because
I think
it starts at the top. You guys
Club,
have it figured out. Yeah.
Outside the Millie Club, I think you're running into this Arkansas stone nightmare. And I don't know why these guys are so married to their stones just because granddad used it. And it's funny that, I don't know. Well, it's like arguing for the virtues of the 286 operating system on a DOS 3.0 versus using today's computers. I don't understand why these guys want to be precious about their sharpener.
You know, it's insanely emotional. It's like, oh, it worked for my granddad for 50, 40 years. You're going to try to tell me that it don't work no more? Well, the thing is like metallurgy and steels,
right?
50-year gap, things have considerably improved.
Right.
And the point is like, you as a human, well, you live like what, 80 years, maybe average or what? I haven't looked it up what the recent life expectancy in America is, but you're only going to live that long. You're going to spend the same amount of time sharpening. Why not use a stone that can cut everything nice and flush, all the different phases and features?
Right.
And the same amount of time, your finite life, okay, the same amount of time you put in, you get that much more edge retention because you're able to shape it and make it that much. You know what I mean? I feel like am I taking fucking crazy pills over here trying to explain it? Because it's so fucking obvious. It makes it difficult to try to explain it in a way that doesn't seem like I'm being like maybe condescending but it's just like, I've been dealing with this stuff now for, God.
You feel like you're getting it out tonight? You feel good?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. I mean, I feel like I go a little fucking crazy sometimes because it takes a lot of patience, I think, to sometimes explain to people because it's like, there's people, because it's crazy, right? I haven't been doing this stuff my entire life. Some people think like, well, somebody like Sean, he's had to have done this his entire life to be as good as he is at what he does. No, it's just people usually that have been saying like, oh, I've been doing this for 30 years. You were used to work in a guitar shop, right? And you've probably seen people that have probably been playing guitar for 30 fucking years. They only play the same fucking song. You know what I mean? They've never improved over 30 years. They don't try and like challenge themselves to get better.
So all the people quirks that you're describing exist in the guitar world too. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
You know, and we used to call it the I had a sales trainer once call it the Uncle Henry effect, because when you're young and you're learning, you learn from Uncle Henry, and Uncle Henry's information is obsolete at the time that he tells you it was true then, but it's not true now. So now you're propagating Uncle Henry's wisdom, right? So when you're in a store and you're trying to sell somebody a guitar, you better sell to Uncle Henry, because if you don't, then they're not going to believe you because that's what they know is to be true. So now the salesperson continues to perpetuate the problem. And I think in the knife world, we have a similar problem. And so what I'm interested to know from you right now is I perceive a problem with MagnaCut in that people think that 62 or 63 Rockwell hardness on a MagnaCut is unacceptable. The knife is garbage. I have to throw it in the dumpster. I have to disavow any knowledge of ever owning it.
I wish it worked like that.
I need 65 on my Rockwell. Otherwise, I won't touch it. So I see these knife makers. I actually had a conversation with a knife maker. I'm not going to say his name, but he told me the other day he's averse to using MagnaCut because he knows people want it higher hardness and he doesn't want to cook it that hard. So it's just insane. I'm like, you're having to bend what you know to be true to the whim of a customer who doesn't know what they need. So I just told him that customers suck. Don't worry about customers. Like, make a good knife. Like, do you see that the same? Do you see that?
You know, the properties of MagnaCut are tied to its chemistry. It's not just like all of a sudden you cook the H. There's been people too that have been saying like, oh, certain HRC is going to have more corrosion resistance. That's built into the design of the steel.
Right.
If you're using it in the asymptotizing ranges that have been recommended by the good doctor, you know, because, you know, of course, you're not going to, some people, they can cook the stuff maybe at 1900 Fahrenheit, which is not recommended. And it's not going to be as corrosion resistant because you're not going high enough in temperature to put more of the chromium in solution. You know, under 2000, you still got chromium carbides, which are also going to be dropping the corrosion resistance. You really have to go past 2000 for that stuff to really get it to where it was designed to work. But that's besides the point. I mean, we're talking about hardness. And the thing is that, well, it depends on the kind of knife that you're making. If you're making a big chopper blade, 65 hardness, that's not going to be conducive to making a really good chopper style knife. Now, I get where some people are trying to come from, where it's like, well, you're making this small cutting blade. It should be as wear resistant as possible, especially if the Magna Cut has all this extreme toughness. That's how we're going to get it to work best. The problem is Rockwell hardness is like measuring body weight. So like if you have two guys that are, say, 200 pounds and they're stepping on a scale, are they going to be the same levels of strength because they both just happen to weigh 200 pounds? Well, we know that from looking at different people, there are different shapes to these people. And we could see if somebody's a little more rotunded like myself, you probably have more fat mass on you, versus if somebody is a little more cut, that same 200 pounds, he's got more contraction fibers to him at that same body weight. So technically, he would be stronger. Right. I mean, you can get into further details there. What kind of contraction fibers? Maybe this guy's got fast twitch. This guy has slow twitch. Not to get too far in the weeds.
Even snuggles in bed.
Yeah. Exactly.
I like my 200 pounds on me.
So not to get too far in the fucking weeds here, but when it comes down to it, Rockwell hardness is measuring the sum of all these constituents making up the microstructure. Because of steel, as we even saw from the micrographs, you have these hard carbides and matrix. Okay, and the hardness tester, it doesn't measure each in between all that stuff. It measures all of it. Okay, so that's like stepping on the scale. When you step on the scale, do you know what your body fat percentage is? Do you know what your muscle fiber type is, or how much muscle fiber you have? Things like that. You don't fucking know that shit. And it's the same thing when it comes to steel. So it would be dishonest to tell people that it needed to be a specific hardness, okay, in order for it to work best. That would be a fucking lie. And the problem is, I would love to tell people that, because it makes it a lot simpler than just explaining what I just explained to you guys. That makes it so much simpler. If all I had to tell them was like 62, you know what I mean? Like, that would make it that much better. Now, at the same time, of course, we do know that if somebody there's weight classes for sports, a lot of sports, like boxing, for instance. You're not going to just be like, well, this guy's a really fucking strong 125-pound person. We're going to throw him in with fucking Bubba at 300 pounds. Well, no, you wouldn't fucking do that, because technically, I mean, yeah, usually if you have more body weight, weight can move weight. You can technically have more strength if you have higher body weight. But the thing is, when we're getting into the weeds of shit, 200-pound person versus 200-pound person, technically one's going to be stronger than the other, not because of body weight. And so there's some nuance there to try to explain to people. You'd have to sit people down. The message is not as clean. It's not as simple. It's not as marketable. Versus it's really easy, I think, if I'm a maker and I want to tell you guys that all this shit sucks, and that all I have to do, if I'm 64, I'm fucking badass. I'm crushing it. I got the amazing heat treatment. Sure, that's really easy for people to digest, but there's a little bit of dishonesty in there, if that makes sense.
Yeah. By the way, everybody, I'm 6'4".
Oh shit!
I'm 250 pounds, and if I were to describe Sean Houston for you, who's on a camera in a weird angle, I would describe his size as scary big. So Sean's much bigger than I am. So for what it's worth,
I'm not worried about that.
I would describe him as accurate to the Big Brown Bear moniker.
Aptly named. That's right, Tom.
Happily.
Sean, we have some questions from the crowd here. I thought you might want to take a gander at. We got Seth Gilman asking, does Sean have a favorite steel?
I mean, it's difficult to have a favorite when you have so many options. I think that you guys cannot possibly fathom how many different steels that I keep the heat treats for in my brain. And I like to think of them and categorize them in different ways, and how I would use this one versus that one. So it would be impossible for me to pick a favorite for you, but I'm pretty smitten with how the 15V came out from Spyderco, and that was in a production environment, and that was really fucking stressful. I mean, I really had to I feel like I really pushed Eric's buttons with trying to get that to where it needed to be.
I bet.
Maybe he was like, dude, you're fucking crazy. Like, this better work, because fuck you. And
stop calling me.
Yeah, and luckily, it did, but it wasn't luck. I mean, there was a lot of work that was behind that. So a lot of people think that maybe, what the fuck is your logo on the side of that blade? You didn't do shit, but no, man, there was a lot of back and forth. You know what I mean? I had some people teasing me saying, like, I don't think Sean's stupid ass went there and heat treated each one. Well, of course not. What are you, fucking retarded? Like, of course I didn't do that. But there was a lot of back and forth with, like, okay, if you're getting these hardnesses from these numbers, like, no, it needs to be these hardnesses from these numbers.
I'll tell you what, the 15V has been unbelievable. I tried sharpening mine, even though it didn't need it, of course, because it comes out of the box stupid sharp because it's Spyderco. But I sharpened it anyway because I wanted to try it, and I found it to be delightful, like you said. Like, it burred great, and it was easy to sharpen. And I am a believer that some steels are slightly different to sharpen than others. Like, if you sharpen M4, you're going to find that it's different experience than if you sharpen 110V. It just feels different as the stones cross it. The time on it is different. Rex 121 takes a lot longer. It still cuts like everything else, but the hardness is so much higher. Like, it cuts different. So to me, I experience it a little different, but the 15V,
we really got to fine tune. We really got to fine tune experience on that. I mean, basically for all 2023, all I carried in my pocket was a Shaman and CPM 15V. That one measured 65.6, I believe. And I didn't want to use anything else because I was getting about, before I would have to, I like to sharpen my knives meticulously. I'm obsessive, like OCD. I was getting about 3 months of edge retention out of that thing. If I use something like VG10, I'm getting like 3 weeks of edge retention. So
yes.
I liked it because I mean, I'm seeing the difference. I don't have to, like, some people, they try to act like it's this type of conspiracy, like, oh, they're so different. Oh. It's like, no, I'm noticing the difference of sharpening how I wanted it to sharpen. And I thought it was badass. I went to SHOT Show, actually, and I had that knife in my pocket. And a friend of mine, Anthony, he's in the firearms industry, and he was kind of falling on hard times. So I was just like, you know what? It's just an object. It doesn't, it's whatever. You can have my shot. It's got my, I told him too, I was like, this has my energy in it from like the whole year. I don't believe in all that type of shit, but it's kind of an emotional thing. It's like, my knife is my fucking favorite. It's like, if you believe in that, I mean, this is something I've carried for the past year. You just have it.
If you're a guitar player, you believe in that kind of shit. It matters.
There you go. Yeah. I'm a man of science, but also there's some things that can't be explained, so maybe there could
I don't
be,
know.
Maybe there couldn't be, but there's no evidence for it. So, but whatever.
I've been able to hold George Harrison's guitar. I've been able to hold Jerry Garcia's guitar. I held an Elvis guitar once, and they just
Did you feel the energy of it, Brad?
They just feel different.
You just feel it. And you know what? Maybe there's no measurable objective thing, but here, to deny yourself to be human, to feel these emotions, is bullshit. So
I touched the volume knob on Jerry Garcia's guitar, and then I licked my finger, and for 12 hours I was in an 8th dimension.
Ooh. Hey,
I was hearing colors. It was amazing.
Finish your glass, Jason. Tom, look away.
Patrick Bryan wants to know what knife you carry often. Oh my goodness, man down. Patrick Bryan wanted to know what knife you carry the most often. Sounds like in 2023 you were carrying your Shaman the most.
Ooh, shit.
You all right?
Oh, I'm good. Yeah, that's if you wanted anything to go down the wrong pipe, it would be Blanton for sure. It's just
right.
It's so sweet and spicy, and the honey and the cinnamon, and oh my god,
good cause.
That's if you're gonna breathe something and die. I mean, it'd be the Blanton for sure.
I agree.
Maybe I'll go on a different journey then, I guess.
There you go. Please do, Tom.
Rex 121 is coming, Sean. That's exciting.
I'm not involved. I feel like I'm on the sidelines for that. I hope they, Spyderco usually does a pretty good job with their heat treatments, and
no question.
We'll see how it turns out. But you guys know me. I mean, I like being involved and jumping in there, and unfortunately, I wasn't involved with that.
That's coming out of Taichung too. So, is there a process for developing steels different? Do they figure out the heat treat in Golden, or do they figure out the heat treat and all that stuff in Taichung for the Taichung knives? Do you know? Like, is that like the different process?
I don't think he's going to tell you, Tom. I think he's his vow of silence.
Keep on asking.
Right here. Let's change this set question and just say, are you excited to try a Sage 5 with Rex 121? I know I am.
It's kind of, I don't know.
You don't know?
I'm an industry person now. You know, for me, I look at the knives very differently. Like I'm more involved with the stuff in the background. So maybe I don't feel that kind of consumer excitement as much.
All right.
That makes sense.
Let's go.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if that disparages the work or anything, but all I'm trying to say is like I get excited about when I get handed a new project to work on and do testing with my hardness tester and microscope and grinding and polishing. That, you know, okay, we want to work on this and don't tell anybody about it. That just makes me happy. I don't mind being in the background working on things.
We got a
yeah. My most carried knife was that 15V Shaman. Now,
yep.
So
I don't know what I fucking carry now.
like the Manix came out, was it like late 22? Is that what the Manix came out? Like a little over a year ago?
Which one?
The Manix. Manix was the first 15V that came out, right?
Yes, it was.
Yeah, yes, sir. Yeah, it came out around just after Thanksgiving, I believe.
Were you nervous when those first hit the street? Like, were you like, oh my God, what if?
Yeah, I mean, I guess what people don't realize, you know, there's a lot of testing that happens before stuff launches. But then it's just like, all right, send me the final sample to test. And it's just like, I was like, man, this better be in the hardness range that we've tested it at, because you still have to test the final. And like, luckily, you know, it was. And then I sharpened it and I tested it and I shared the testing. And I was like, oh, thank God. You know, this is what's going to work for people. And people are going to enjoy this. But we'll see. You know, for all I know, you know, it only takes several dickheads to be like, maybe they have an agenda or stuff like that. You know, like we talked about how sometimes you have people that they're just like, I don't like Sean. I just, when I look at his face, I fucking hate that guy's face. You know, you can't help that kind of shit. So maybe some people are like, I'm going to get a 15V and I don't like that guy's fucking face. And I want to show him how much of a fucking idiot he is. And, you know, there's always that chance. And I think that, you know, for a lot of us in our lives, we never want to put ourselves out there to be so scrutinized. I think that making custom knives is probably one of the most fucking stressful things I can think of, because each knife, you're putting your heart and soul into it, and you're putting it out there to be scrutinized by everybody from your fellow makers that also struggle to make their knives. You're under their scrutiny.
You made a really good example of this when you were over here. You were talking about this, and I didn't really think about it. So, you know how much time, effort, precision, whatever I put into this part of the knife, just right here.
Yeah.
You make a custom knife, do that same level of obsession with every aspect, every facet of the knife, the handle, the spine, the edge, the heel, the tip.
You need to have that mindset. When you first make your first couple knives, you don't have it. So you're just excited that you even just fucking made something. But then you start realizing, if you want to survive, if you want to tread in the deep end with all the big dogs and bump elbows, you need to be your own worst enemy. And you need to basically be like, okay, there's shit I make, it don't pass the cut. You don't pass it on to the consumer, you know? And so it's fucking stressful. And you, like I said in the beginning of this kind of talk, where you kind of negative people, their lips are loose. They just spew negativity versus, you know, person who's got a more emotional control. They're more of a buffer of that shit. They hold it in. There's releases. There's healthy releases you need to have, like exercise, or mine is, I like boxing and doing stuff like that, like, you know, or breaking shit. I like to do that sometimes too.
Who doesn't? Like, I mean, boys will be boys.
Yeah, but you have to have these type of healthy releases, but you need to be your own worst enemy when it comes to scrutiny of things. Like, I mean, I could pull out a knife right now that I've worked on that didn't make the cut. So, like when S35VN was first released, I had a knife that was made in it, but unfortunately, I fucked up. I fucked up the loveless bolt and I ground it. I didn't get it seated deep enough.
Uh-oh.
I ground it off. But, you know, what happens with stuff like that? Gets thrown in the fucking junk drawer, never to see the light of day. But you have to be on yourself about stuff like that. And it's not just stuff like that, but also like just little nuanced things that if you're not a maker, it doesn't make any sense to you. But when you're in the maker world, your brain is framed into this whole new world of looking at things. And there's certain things that you have scrutiny about that the end user, they don't seem to care about, but you have to be that way.
Well,
Because you don't make enough knives to not care.
Well, it's like
your
the
job
difference
is
between Spyderco and like a maker like you. Spyderco is more than okay with people knowing they have seconds, because to them it shows that they have good QC, that because seconds exist in the first place.
it's
A
a
maker
it's
like
an
you
army.
doesn't want a flawed product existing in the market floating around with your name on it.
It's just me. It's just me. There's no team behind me. That's why collaboration is important, because when I collaborate with Spyderco, there's a team that's sharing like what I do. Like there's my logo on that blade. There's a marketing team that's behind sharing all that stuff. There's a little pamphlet that comes with that steel. It says, "Oh, Sean did the heat treat. He's a good custom knife maker." It's like, I can't pay for that kind of advertising. So it's a cooperation versus like when I make knives, they've already figured out mass production, in the 20th century with like, Henry Ford and guys like that. They already figured that shit out. Anybody making knives now by hand, what are you, an idiot? Like they've already figured out how to mass produce that. Why are you sitting there making them by hand? You make them by hand because you're chasing details that cannot be met by volume. So when somebody comes to the custom world, they're not just buying that, just goofy handmade, because there's also some goofiness with handmade knives where it's like, this production knife has cleaner grinds, it's got cleaner this, better that, versus like little Johnny over here's got these goofy grinds, nothing's even, it's a little crooked, but he's trying to pass it off. Well, it's handmade, it's all good. And maybe the heat treatment kind of sucks because he's blowtorching it, on some fire brick or something. And it's like, well, it skated the file, I mean, this hardness test, things like these hardness testers, these microscopes and stuff, that costs money,
Yep.
You got to invest in all that stuff. You got to learn how to use it. You're sitting there, you're trying to build a really good product, that kind of falls between the cracks with production versus when you do custom handmade stuff, you have to charge a lot because it takes you more time to do it. But then people that really fucking care about those details, they can get them. Okay, it's not like it's 1,000 times better than what you can get from production, but because there's always a diminishing return.
Yep.
So it is a mix between there is some performance and there's some art and there's some science and there's also some emotions that are built in where you're literally, if you buy a knife from me, you're buying a fucking piece of me. We're like, wow, how long do I live? 80 years if I'm lucky, especially from doing this knife making shit. Like, I can only make so many fucking knives over the period of my life. I got a family to take care of and stuff like that. There's a whole team that supports me with my family. I can't just be a guy living in my fucking mom's basement making fucking knives. Some people do. But like, you know what I mean? There's a cost to it. There's a cost to allowing me to go as far as I can with this, to allow me to purchase more equipment, to spend more time doing the details, to be a professional with this stuff. And that's what you pay for when you buy those knives from me. And that doesn't take anything away from buying a production knife for less money. So we do different things.
So Sean, I got a question in the comments here. This is something that's worth, I'd like to know the answer. You have a prototype that's shown up for a few years in the Spyderco case.
Yeah, that's a really funny story because I gave them that prototype back in 2019.
Yeah.
It's been 5 years now, and I don't care because they could have made it that next year if I told them Tai Chung. And I'm not, I'm not xenophobic or anything like that. I got no problem with things being made overseas, and then Tai Chung does an amazing job. But for me personally, like my favorite knives have always been
Golden Colorado.
The Golden Colorado knives. They have this type of like just flair, uniqueness, just the texturing of the G10, all those little details, just like chef kiss. It's always been my favorite. To me, it's like the heart and soul of what a Spyderco is. Not to take away anything from all the other different factories, but I told Sal and Eric that, and I said, "Listen, I don't fucking care how long it takes to get made.
Yep. I'll wait my turn.
I'll wait my turn. I don't care what you guys are going through. With this factory being set up, this and that. Make it in golden, and I'll wait. I don't care if I gotta wait 20 years. Just make it in golden. I don't care. So for me, it's like I've kind of like I've not been I'm not going to keep hyping it up. I'm not going to be like, guys, listen, it's coming or anything like that. When it happens, it happens. But I want it to be made in Golden, Colorado. And that's where the whole 15V thing got started, because I knew that if it was made here in Golden, I could work more with U.S. manufacturing to get the steel I wanted and the heat treat I wanted. And Sal was gracious enough to be like, yeah, man, whatever steel and heat treat you want, we'll do that. Because he had a good amount of respect for me.
If you guys rewind the video about 15 minutes to where Sean held up his knife that he made and he showed us the fixed blade, my memory of the folder is that it's definitely from the same designer, so it's going to be a little bit emblematic of that. It is a folder. It's 15V. I remember it having a micarta handle.
Could be.
But remember, it's all a prototype right at this point.
Just
but
a
if
prototype,
you go to Blade Show, if you go to Blade Show, you can stand at the proto counter and you can touch it. There's all kinds of cool protos in there. So
yeah, there's no pictures of the prototype cases, but yeah, there's definitely prototypes and things like that there that you can check out and get your hands on. They don't like pictures and stuff because it's prototypes. It's what they're working on. But
yeah,
one reason is because it could change. Yeah, it could change. Why is this different why is a production version different? Like, there's a lot of things in that prototype case over the years that have changed. Yeah. So
Sean has a definite aesthetic to his knives, and one thing he thinks about that he's obviously mindful of is that the cutting experience. Like when you're gripping the knife, what's it like to cut something? So he spends a lot of time concerning himself about how does it hold in the hand, and when you cut with it, will it cut well? So I remember the folder to be the same. Like it's of that essence. You're going to find that
you're
going to like using it.
I'm a huge fan of offset handles because I feel like that kind of that's one way of getting away from having a guard and things on the knife. Then another thing is like it also helps with like kydex retention for one, and then also when it comes to sharpening the knife, it kind of gets the handle out of the way. So that's why I've been a big fan of that type of stuff. And then I like the curves and things of the knife. I like a neutral handle so you can hold it in just any different type of grip you want. It's always going to be comfortable. It doesn't necessarily like lock your hand in one position, because sometimes when you're using a knife, you use it in all kinds of different positions. You don't necessarily want to be committed to one different, finger choils right there. You can only hold it like that. This is the only way you can hold this knife. You're kind of limiting yourself, in my opinion. I mean, that doesn't mean I don't like things that Spyderco makes, like, PM2 and things like that have all these big curves and choils and things like that. But for my knives, for what I like more of a neutral offset handle, and that's been kind of my design DNA, since I started doing knives like that back in 2018.
Well, Sean, we're coming up on 2 hours. We should probably wrap it up. We've been at it a while. Before we go, we should definitely mention that your 15V wizardry is going to be showing up on more knives in 2024, perhaps 2025.
All the knives.
Really excited about that. I mean, shit, the first time it came out, I basically, Eric told me, like, we're probably not going to do that again because it's difficult material to grind and work with. So I was like, and I was kind of a pain in the ass when it came to making sure everything was done how it needed to. So, I guess he figured between the grinding, the cost, and me being a fucking pain in the ass about the heat treat, he's like, yeah, I'm probably not going to do more of that stuff. But it's because of you guys out there that have enjoyed it, that have bought it, that have experienced it. The saying is good advertising only helps a bad product fail faster. If it was all hype, you guys would have certainly fucking let my ass know. Who doesn't want to see somebody who thinks they're some master of disaster fall on his fucking face? But you guys have been very gracious and sharing and enjoying the 15V, and so there's going to be more of it. And it's been a real Cinderella story. I've really certainly enjoyed it, and I'm very grateful. It doesn't go to my head. Like, I appreciate it. Thank you.
I'd love to have you back, Sean, to talk about. I've learned a lot from you about edge. So edge deformation, chipping, the things that cause an edge to fail. And you've sent me lots of photos, and I've seen lots of photos of the edge stuff. And we talked a little bit tonight about CPM versus regular steel, and I think everybody is going to benefit from that. But if we could talk next time about edge and about what a good edge looks like versus a crappy edge or a chewed up edge.
You know, and I'd love
I
to
think
do that. I mean, I've invested a considerable amount of my time, my life, my heart, and my soul into that stuff. I mean, you're looking at this is, you know, $8,000, $14,000 microscope setup over here. You know, I take this shit very fucking serious.
You've shown me steel photos of a steel and then a steel that you heat treated or you customized the heat treatment and with a picture that really was meaningful to me was like, well, this is what the edge looks like on the regular version, and this is what the edge looks like on my heat treatment. And I thought it was really cool because like that's what really should matter to all of us is when we're cutting stuff, does it hold up or does it not? Does it need constant touching or does
that's where the rubber meets the road.
Or does
exactly,
it
yeah, and that's where the rubber meets the road. It's essentially like it's easy to get lost in the numbers of everything, and you know, especially when you're a casual person and you're looking at all this stuff, and you're just like, okay, I've got other hobbies I'm interested in. Just tell me if this works or not. And when you could see a picture of that stuff, this is this is that, this is better, and this is why, and you can see it. Like that's really important, you know. So that's why it was worth the investment for all this different stuff over here, you know. And sometimes, you know, even in my area of work, I'm treated like a crazy person with all people I work with because it's but you have to. It's easy to get lost in the numbers and forget that the most important thing is the end user. That's the reason why all this fucking shit is done. It's not to puff up my ego. It's not to say that I'm fucking so great at this stuff. It's that I want to get the stuff in the hands of myself 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when I didn't know as much as I did now. And I just wanted something that worked good. I just wanted to enjoy it. I don't want to be a material science engineer to be able to appreciate something, or that because everybody says this is good, that it's working good. I don't need that. If I get it and I use it, I appreciate it because it's just working. I don't know anything about it, but it's just working better. And I think that's the grail. I think that's what it's all comes down to. That's what it comes down to when you're arguing with people about things, you know, in the industry, behind the scenes, when you're arguing with these people about like, okay, listen, it needs to be like this. It's because the end line user, you guys out there, you're the most important people in the world, because all the numbers and mumbo jumbo and marketing stuff doesn't matter. It's, do you get it? You use it and you sharpen it, you enjoy it. That's number one. And you need people like that behind the scenes working on that stuff to make sure you guys get that stuff.
Couldn't be said better. Sean, thank you for joining us tonight. I'm glad you could be here. It was a pleasure, man. As always. I'm so glad you I know we were waiting on a camera and a microphone, and now you got it, and we can have you back more often. So
I got the camera that Tom recommended to me.
Did you really?
Oh yeah. Dude, Tom is a total like
I like knowing things about stuff. I'm like,
Tom knows all the stuff about gear and stuff. That's why I get along well with Tom. Tom knows that, like, he's just a geekoid about that. In fact, I think both me and Tom have like severe ADHD, so that's why we kind of.
Tom's into what he's into, but he's not into what he's not into. So if you ask him about carbides, he'll just go, "What?"
Well, that's where me and Tom have the common ground. Is like if I communicate with Tom, it's essentially like crossing bridges between somebody who's like, he's done all the work and geek out stuff with all the stuff I don't care about. So I could just ask Tom. Well, that's the thing. Like when I went over there, like, cause I don't really geek out as much about like, oh, this lock and this stuff. You know, I care more about the blade and the edge and stuff. But when I communicate with you guys, and especially Tom, he's super geeked out on that stuff. So now it's like I've got that fucking power too. I've got this power, and then I got that power now too.
He's a geeko, right?
I feel the same way about like sweatshirts as you do about steel. So I've been like researching how fabrics are made and stuff, and it's like, why? But I fucking love it. Today I spent an hour shopping for zippers. Yeah, that happened today. That's a thing. So I get it. Get deep. Everybody, get deep into stuff. It's rewarding. It's fun.
If all the ADHD people got together and just like oh my god, like the amount of like information be insane. You know, I have no hesitation to ask Tom about any of the stuff he's into. Like, okay, which is best? Like Tom is he's super geeked out on all the good shit. Like I have
found that sometimes he'll just quote whatever Wirecutter said. So you gotta, I don't know. It's not always.
Wirecutter
right.
is a good source. That's where you start. All right.
Thanks for watching, everybody.
Show.
We're gonna end the show right at 2 hours. Thanks for watching. Thanks for being
right
here.
On. Thanks, guys. Thanks for bringing me on. I really appreciate it. I'm
so glad you could be here.
Guys. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, buddy. We'll catch up with you soon, and you guys tune in next week. We've got a whole bunch of extra guests coming. Tom's been like a red ass baboon, just chasing after people, getting them signed up. So, Tyler,
I'm excited, dude. I'm so excited about all different guests you guys have. Like,
me too.
I can't wait to see.
Ooh, we can call them out on air.
Yeah,
we had a cancellation for next week, so we
had
a
cancellation. Tyler Pipes, why don't you come on the show? You've been talking about it for 2-3 years. We need you to come on and talk about the wonder and the beauty and the majesty that is Smoky Mountain Knife Works. Love to talk to you about it.
So that would be really cool. Yeah, and I can understand it. I mean, I was supposed to be on last week, but man, I just
life happens.
I get a little. Yeah, I got life. I got I was sicker. The social anxiety sometimes is kind of rough too. I get that for you guys out there, but please come on the show. These guys are great to talk with, and you don't have to be like the master of disaster. Just come and talk with these guys. These guys are fantastic to come.
We're capable of picking our nose on camera to keep it going. Don't worry.
Oh,
it's good.
Yeah,
I've seen it. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a good night.
Later.